my name is Raj Nair. I was planning to record these project management videos for a long time, thinking the people who are really interested in learning what is project management means and how exactly I can explain the project management and basic concept in a very simple way, and that will help anybody who is stepping into project management as well as knowing some basic concept can refine their understanding and apply the knowledge into the practical areas. With that in my mind, I am planning to record a series of videos to explain this project management in next couple of days. So this is the beginning of the project. Basic fundamental understanding about what is project management means. In that context, I really want to explain what is project management and how it can be understood in a simple way of definitions. First thing, we have to make sure all of us are project managers to some extent. One way or the other, we are doing project management in our day-to-day life. Once we understand this basic definition, you should be able to relate that to what activities that what we are doing on day-to-day basis are project, as well as what are those standard operational activities. By definitions, anything that we are doing which is non-routine means that not repeated tasks are called projects, and those who have limited definitions by time, by budget on the cost side, a limited amount of resources, as well as there is an expectation about how the results or outcome will perform. These three dimensions, which in project management world we commonly say those things are triple constraints or iron triangle. We have a defined time, we have a given amount of money, and within that given amount of time and money, we should be able to get something done. And those who are at the receiving side, normally customers or sponsors, they should be able to see the outcome is what they expected or what they defined for us to do. There are 5 characteristics which defines the project. Again, it should have an objective. What results or outcome is going to produce after that given time. It should have a begin and end, which we always say is a start and there's an end, or we can say it's a finite amount of time. We can also say it should be unique. If we are doing this for many times, the same thing, in our world, PM world, we call those are not projects, those are operational activities. Again, it should have done in a specific amount of time, specific amount of budget, and have some performance requirements. All these are running by a specific set of resources. You do not have unlimited amount of resources too. The next definition, the common definition, is done by how do you define a project. We all refer to a book which we call PMBOK, or Project Management Body of Knowledge. It has a definition which says it's a temporary endeavor or temporary undertaking to create a unique product or service that is defined as a project. Well, in last 5 minutes, I was talking and explained to you what is project and what are the variations, what is project and not project, such and such. I'm sure those who are beginners, those who are newbies, still concerned, still having a fuzzy understanding about what this project means. To give a common understanding, a better definition, I would like to give a simple example. Let's say you are going for a vacation. a family vacation, it has some specific objective. It has to meet certain criteria. Of course, you have a limited amount of budget. You cannot exceed that. Of course, it has limited amount of time, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, 2 days, whatever the time is defined. So it has a time, it has a budget, it has a scope, it's an objective. And now, going back to my first question, are you a project manager? Are you doing projects in your day-to-day life? The finite and very clear answer, I would say the precise answer is yes. We are all project managers. We're all doing projects. It's a thought process. It's a mindset to differentiate and identify what is project and what is not project. I'm going to use this simple example throughout my videos every day as we are progressing through the classes and how to apply the principles for a vacation project and make you understand the concept and practical side of project management. Let's move on to the next slide here. Again, what are the different types of work? As I mentioned, it's very difficult to differentiate. Even people having or project managers having experience 3 or 4 or 5 years, they still should not able to differentiate what is project and operations. Even some senior executives makes this mistake and calling project as operations or operational activities. If you look into the form of work which I displayed in the screen, you can see there are activities which we can call as a project by the basic definition I mentioned and explained in slide 1. As long as it's unique, is producing a product or service, it has fixed amount of time, fixed amount of resources, fixed amount of cost, it's like a project. If you look into the job shops, good example, all of you can relate is that what is happening in the field or how it's changing places. It's a routine work, it's a standard work. Those standard work in and out, they are doing the same thing, the same standard process. There is no uniqueness. Even though it has a time and a cost, the uniqueness is not there. So those kind of activities we call as job shop work or operational activities. Those are one of the examples that you can see here. When you also move to factories, we can also see more operational activities, but it's in batches. They do certain tasks, bottling or manufacturing any product. We can see that one set of tasks, then it proceeds to another one, it proceeds to another one, it proceeds to a finished product. This one batch is done. The next batch start. That's also more operational activities than what we call as projects. When we come to about processes, continuous process is also there. Like oil refineries, lot of things. It's a simple process repeating. It's not a batch like a product-oriented operational activities. It's also continuously operating without any stop. There is no time defined. There is no uniqueness. They are also not projects. Now, coming to the hope you understood what is triple constraints means. We define a project in the way of time, cost, and scope. If one parameter change, if I want to say I need more work, let's say we planned everything for 5 days of vacation, all of a sudden it has to cut down to 3 days, or it has increased to 7 days, the scope will change, the objective will change. Or let's say one of the kids would like to have skiing done, or one other person would like to have golfing done, the objective changes. Same thing, the time can also be changed, as I mentioned before, 5 days to 7 days, 3 days it can change. Or we planned everything for $5,000 for the entire family, and what we found out that, well, because of the current situations, and we have to cut down that budget to 3,000, then we have to look what are the things we can reduce, whether I can reduce the number of days or number of objectives that we have. It's a balance that. Now coming to the project life cycles concept. What is project lifecycle? As I mentioned, a project is a formation of certain things. In that formation, we have to define, going for a vacation, what that vacation means. It's an in-state, out-state, what are the activities to be included, who are all going for vacation. So it's basically a conceptualization, definition of the project. Then we plan all the activities, that is called planning. And then we actually do that project, it's called execution. And then they deliver it, actually get the outcome. That's the one way of looking at the project in PLC or project lifecycle. When you come to the IT side, there are a lot of different definitions. One definition is systems lifecycle or system development lifecycle means. In that, it's called initiate, that's called ideation phase. Then we move on to the planning phase, where we plan certain things out, when we design things, and then we build things, we test it out, and then we deploy it, and finally close out. Let's say a simple example, those who are in IT field can think about building a mobile applications. We define what this mobile application is supposed to do, we build it, we build the code, the developers, we test it out with the different phones and different operating system, Android and iOS and such. Then we make sure it got deployed in productionized form. Then people start downloading and using it. Then once they get the initial feedback, we close out the project. So that is a life cycle that we can normally understand in IT world. In other world like construction or manufacturing or engineering, they may have different framework where they do certain things. Another common framework that we can see in the IT is also called solution delivery framework, integration delivery framework. Does not matter. Even though we say different names in different domain, the understanding or underlying principle behind this is all same. There is a set of activities that we do to define what this project is supposed to do. Then we plan all the activities, which is called planning phase. Then we move on to the execution phase, where things start rolling, things start producing. Whatever is producing, we monitor and inspect, or test is called monitor and control, and close out. So those are the normal phases. Now let's move on to project manager role. If you look into the project manager role, there are common mistakes can happen, and it is better way to differentiate two types of managers. One we normally call as the functional managers or supervisors. Their objective is to make sure the operational day-to-day activities is flowing and people are efficient, people are not making mistakes, it's more profitable, and at the end of the day things are done very fluently. They are more like people managers or functional managers. When you look into the project managers, their mindsets, their objective is a little bit different. They engage in a temporary work, a temporary set of resources, connected with them, and linked with them only for a certain amount of period with a clear goal or objective in their mind. Once they are done, they move on to the different projects. And it's primarily the project manager's responsibility is to make sure they engage and identify the right people and make sure they are well efficient to complete the working time within the budget. Other questions can happen. Why the project manager role is more important in recent years? The reason being, there are a lot of things being drastically changed. A lot of parameters have been directly changed. So planning itself may not help. We have to juggle with a lot of things like global competitions. Knowledge is available in some other part of the world. You have to see the current situations of COVID and also downsizing of corporate, merging of corporations, buying new market entities, expanding the market target to different areas. We also see the rapid development happens, how quickly we can produce the results because of the market demand or competitions. there are several smaller activities happening, but if they let it go by independently, it's not producing the better results. So you have to consolidate and collaborate the activities. There are different reasons, but all these reasons cohesively has to produce the best results for the corporation or a business. An orchestrator is needed, and that person is basically the project manager. So the definition of the project manager, or what is the objective of a project manager role, is totally different than an operational manager or functional manager. The skills that person needed is also clearly different than a functional manager. Now look into the project life cycle. This is a good graph which shows effort versus efficiency. Where exactly we have to spend more time and energy in a project management. So you can see from the graph, the effort is gradually going up, which means when you define the project and you plan it, only a few people are involved in planning. But once you start building, more people are involved. And that is the phase, like an execution phase, the result is actually being produced. Once the result produced, go back to testing, inspect phase, and close out. We can see this in the vacation project too. At the same time, to make it to the extreme, we can imagine that you are building a bridge. When you build the bridge, when you plan that bridge, or when you are building a single family house, in the ideation phase or designing phase or the planning phase, not that many people are involved. But once you start building the house or you start building the bridge, there are more people involved, more equipment involved, more money got spent because of the materials, human resources, and everything. And once you complete the bridge, then the inspection and everything will continue and the project will close. So this is a graph which explains where the maximum resource help needed, where the more dollar amount will be burned in what phase of the project from a times perspective. Even though I explained to you before the SLC, PLC, as well as SDLF, this is a PMBOK way of defining, a neutral way of defining different phases of the project. The first one is basically initiation. We might have heard different terminology called ideation, conceptualization, but everything is same. This is the area where somebody is authorizing. Okay, this is an approved project. We are ready to spend money. We are ready to seek resources. We are ready to identify the customer need officially and move on. It's an initiation phase. One of the key documents that you can refer in the initiation phase is called the charter. The charter is the one which we define all the key elements, the charter. The charter which defines the key element is also the sponsor starts saying, okay, you can go and start doing the project. When you move on to the planning phase, that's where the scope is defined. The scope is nothing but collecting the requirements, define the requirement, what exactly the customer needs. For example, going for vacation, who are the stakeholders, the dad, mom, and kids. Of course, if the grandparents is coming, they're also a part of the vacation. So you ask them, what are their interests? Where do you want to go? And then you move on to create WBS. WBS is nothing other than work breakdown structure. It's basically work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure, we break that work or project into small chunk of activities. Those activities are known as tasks. And when we break that, for example, in case of vacation, I would rather break the first piece into preparation. What are the things you have to prepare? And there is a chunk of activities you are doing during the vacation. Let's call that bucket enjoy the vacation. And what are the activities that you are doing once you come back from the vacation? That is called, can name it anyway, but these are the three buckets, and within three buckets, we can even break that down to smaller chunk. Let's say buying stuff and packing stuff, getting the laundry done and get ready, buy the ticket, make the car reservation, such and such. So we will explain that more in the day 2 video, but at least understanding the planning, you are planning how exactly I can do this project. In the execution phase, what we are talking here is basically how exactly I am going to make this project work, how exactly I am going to execute this project. And then, as I mentioned, you start rolling in, you start burning the money, things are getting done. How do we know exactly we are doing the activities which is helping the work to be done? Let's say you go for vacation and you're doing certain activities, but those activities is not at all planned or not at all meeting the objective. You just roam around here and there. At the end of the day, you're not accomplishing much. You're not enjoying that particular day according to the original objectives. You're really not according to the plan. You're really not going to meet the objectives at the end. So that mechanism, that activities or that section of activities called monitor and control. We check with the plan. Are we doing everything according to the plan? If you are not doing according to the plan, you're still having any objectives meeting towards the goal or final outcome. If not, we should not be doing it. It's as simple as like that. So that mechanism is called monitor and control. We check against something, feedback to the system will adjust and we go forward. The final phase of the project is nothing other than close out. Once you're done, once you come back to the equation, what do? You want to do a lot of things. You don't want to keep those stuff in your suitcase or luggage for so many days or so many months. You have to take the releases out. You have to take your dirty clothes out. You have to make sure you return the rental car. A lot of things you have to do. That phase of activity is called close out. Now, let's move on to see why we need projects. It's also important. Because a lot of companies, a lot of businesses, well, we have to do a project. And let's do it. Have some money, have some resource, and get it done. Strictly speaking, we are not doing project for just the sake of just doing the project. We first understand the organizational vision, why that organization stands for. For example, let's say you are in cell phone service or you are in cruise vacationing. You have to see why this organization stands. Or let's say best cruise vacation company in the world, that's the vision. How do we become that? Okay, we have to make sure all our unique activities is steering towards that vision. A simple example again, I can come back. Let's form a runners club. We have a vision saying we produce best runners. Then how exactly we do it? We have to do a lot of events to do that. So that vision got translated into what, and those what will define how we meet certain specific goals. To meet certain specific goals, we identify some strategic activities. In fact, the strategic activities is the one which defines the number of projects that we have to do in a particular year or in a particular quarter. So normally in that situation, once you identify all those things, this is one of the biggest problem in the business. We have tons of projects identified. Do we have resource, in the sense like people, money, time to get all those things done? Probably not. In that case, we have to identify the project selection criteria. How do I select certain projects? We go one by one project and identify how it is aligned with the strategic goals. In which portfolio? Portfolio means that the type of customer, the type of market, type of product that we are doing. We do not want to spend all the money and resource into one portfolio only. We have to balance that out. We also look into the benefit, how much return of investment that project is producing. Is it really having much risk, even though it's high return of interest, but it is high risk? Probably it's not a wise idea to spend much money and resource on that project. All these things are done by a set of people who are very expert in that organization, who are usually directors or VP levels, who are leaders, who knows this organization very well regarding this vision, mission, and the strategic goals. And they are the one go through the list of all the projects, hundreds or 50 of the project, and say these are the projects it makes sense to do this quarter or this year. That's the way the project selection is done. Now, going back to that initial phase, since this is the video 1 where I need to explain about project initiation. The project initiation, the very important factor is to identify the project. Remember, we selected the project. Now we have to initiate that project. To initiate that project, we have to create a formal document which is called charter. The charter is not something created by all the projects. Don't get too much scared by the word charter. This is an official document, is as simple as saying this project is approved and these are the critical things should be covered in the project, and this is the person XYZ is authorized to this project as a project manager. So if you look at the key elements here, of course, it should have a title, it should have some description, it should have a business case or business justification. We are designating a PM so that this person is authorized to run the project and get the money. You are also identifying who are the key stakeholders. Stakeholders means that who are impacted by the project positively or negatively, what exactly is going to produce, what are the critical milestone activities, so we know how we are progressing. We can make sure we can do intermediate check at the end of the project, how we can say the project is a success or fail, how much money we are going to spend, where the resource is coming, is internal, external, or contractors, is any risk that we already identified or not, any kinds of assumptions, constraints, boundaries. The only point I need to highlight here is about assumptions, constraints, and boundaries. Those are very confusing terms, but it's very important to understand whenever we are doing the any projects. Going back to our vacation example, we can assume that we are limited the vacation to, say, Lake Orlando or something like that with geographical locations. We can also say the constraints what they have. Based upon constraints means the limitation which is outside our control. Maybe it's a rainy season or seasonal kind of constraints. Any kind of budgetary constraints. We cannot plan anything and everything out because we are limited to the cost, or we are also limited to number of days available. Boundaries. Boundaries in this sense is easy to understand what is in and out. When we talk about any project, we also need to understand if we identify a task, when we break down that project, we have to say whether that is within the scope or outside the scope. So the charter is again a very good formal document which explains and defines the project and giving enough authority for a particular person to seek the fund from the corresponding business leaders and get their approval and releasing of the money and getting enough supporting resources so we can start mobilizing the project. So now, last but not least, one more point I would like to cover in this slide is about organization. Organization in the sense like how we build a team. Once we identify a project, of course, we have the time and money given to us, but how do we find the resources? Who is going to do the work? And how exactly we are going to align those resources and form a team? To do that, we also need to understand how the organization is structured. There are different types of structure that we can see, functional or projectized or matrix, depending upon the reporting structure or managerial structure. But once you understand the basic foundational hierarchy in the organization, it's easy for understand and lay out the strategy to form a team and get all the people together. You also need to look into the operational priority, whether the organization is supporting the project or is basically an inhibitor or not. You also want to see how the roles and responsibility is being defined and clear enough for everybody so that we will get enough support once you start mobilizing the project or not. So there are a couple of things we have to consider as far as the organization of team is concerned. Another point here is about the latest trend that we see in how do we manage this project. There are a couple of ways we can manage any project. One way is like we initiate, plan, and we just strictly follow the plan to get things done. That approach is normally known as a waterfall approach or traditional approach. It's basically a waterfall approach where you can see the planning and you just follow the plan. And the other approach that we normally know as that we run this project, we get things done, but in an incremental fashion, in a feedback position. For example, if you look back to the vacationing project, and if you think that we have 5 days of vacation spent in a waterfall kind of approach, what we do is that we plan out all 5 days and we literally follow that path. And we just get some feedback, but it's just to follow the path to make sure we are strictly following that guidelines or not. In the Agile case, if you make a twist to make it a little more simple to understand the concept, you don't necessarily need to follow exactly the plan. Probably you plan out a day, and at the end of the day, you have a meeting which we call in Agile world called retrospective. That is nothing other than a self-evaluation of how the day went through, and you look into the next day's plan, you incorporate the feedback, plan that day 2 out, and then at the end of the day 2, then you evaluate how things performed, how things got managed, and plan day 3. So in a day 5 kind of situation, to differentiate these two approach, one is like planned out 5 days and you follow through, and in Agile world where we are doing actually 5 sprints or 5 iterations, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and day 5. Those are the principal variations in how we can manage a project from beginning to end. Saying that, hope you enjoyed this video, and this gave you a good introduction to what project means, what project manager role means, how exactly we can initiate a project, what is the basic artifacts that you needed to get a project approved and mobilize a project. And last slide we covered about how to form a team and what are the different types of organization, and we also briefly touched upon what is Agile project management. Hopefully you enjoyed this session, and we'll catch up with day 2.